Hello and welcome to a very special cover story conversation. We have on board two very articulate speakers, two thinkers, two people who are very well versed in geopolitics. I have with me Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, BJP leader, Rajya Sabha MP, and Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the ITV network. Today, we're going to be talking about India's place in this neighborhood, especially regarding Sri Lanka, regarding Pakistan, what is happening. And in fact, Dr. Swamy, you and I have been talking a lot about the Rajapaksas and, what an opportunity it was for India to build bridges with the Rajapaksas. What went wrong, for the Rajapaksas themselves? We'll talk about India later.
Well, I'm not a unbiased observer of Sri Lanka, because I'm an undiluted admirer of Rajapaksa for what he has done for the national security of not only Sri Lanka, but by impact for India. And that is eliminate the LTTE, which nobody else could do. And he eliminated them thoroughly. I mean, literally like the grass being pulled from its roots. But the present crisis goes back to the first term of Rajapaksa, that is Mahinda Rajapaksa. His brother Gotabaya Rajapaksa is equally smart and brilliant and a good friend of mine too. And in the first term, Rajapaksa decided that Sri Lanka will no more be a tourist spot, for people to come and go with the natural surroundings, etc. And sometimes, massage, so on the usual things. He said he wanted to be a serious country, so he decided to go in for big projects. Hamantota was one project he thought of. Then up in the north, he decided to build factories. So, I mean, he drew up a lot of projects. And for financing, because he inherited more or less a bankrupt government from the past, from Ranil and other people who literally were swamped by the attacks of the LTT and didn't know what to do. And they relied on foreign advice, and foreign advice is always very bad. And so he looked for funds, and for Hamantota, he first approached Manmohan Singh's government, and Ms. Sonia Gandhi vetoed it. And the reasons I will require another sitting with you in the television. Okay. It's too deep and too complex. But she just vetoed it. And then he went through the elimination of the LTT, which seems to have enraged Sonia Gandhi and Chidambaram and others quite a lot. Now, but he carried on. But his projects weren't getting money, so he decided to go for an easy outlet, and that was China. And China, you see, their brains are just like ours, except that we don't exercise them, they exercise it. And they first entice you.
Dr. Swamy, are you going to leave any viewers that won't be offended by our comments by the end of the show?
Well, you want a show or you want just a propaganda?
Okay.
You'll get, your ratings will go up, don't worry. So I'm saying that the Chinese first, and anyway, making fun of the Chinese is not anymore bad after what they have done to us in Ladakh and Arunachal. I think, you see, what they do is they've done it in Africa. And you have to go to Africa, visit it to see. They first entice you with easy loans. And then you want more loans, then they start saying, what about the old loans? You haven't paid back that. And then they put harder conditions and so on. Literally, he walked into that. Now, after much efforts of mine and many others, the Prime Minister yielded, and against the advice of bureaucrats like the Foreign Secretary and others, and went ahead and gave a 1 crore recently to Sri Lanka. But 1 crore is not sufficient. We have foreign exchange reserves of about 500 billion. And I think we should have given him 10 billion. And 10 billion would have seen him through. But I think, as usual, the bureaucrats, you got to keep control. And once he takes it, you may forget us, blah, blah, all this usual stuff. And in fact, our foreign secretary went on an inspection tour whether petrol was really short or it was being made up. I don't know what he went for. You don't know. Foreign secretaries don't foreign ministers don't go inspecting petrol pumps, but he did. So I think we have been a little tight-fisted about thing. Either you go all the way and rescue him, then he is forever grateful to you. Like I am grateful to him for eliminating LTT. So now he's in a real fix and nobody is going to be able to correct it. I'm sure that if there is a government falls and another opposition government comes, they too will go back to the Chinese. And this is a very dangerous period because the Chinese have got a Machiavellian plan about world conquest itself. What is happening in Ukraine has some connection with that, but we are not on that subject this time. But the fact is...
in also, on the...
Yeah, so therefore, this is the aspect. Now, Nalapat has also visited with me and of course, he has disagreements with me. And once I asked Moraji Desai, you and I seem to be such good friends, but I have so many differences with you. So how is it that this is going on? He said, if two people agree on everything, one is redundant. So, so if I agree with him on everything, what do I need to do a TV show?
And Dr. Professor Nalavat, please, with you on Sri Lanka, do you agree with him or you are, are there disagreements? Because he's made two important points. One is the Chinese dependency, and also a lot of people are saying post-COVID, the tourism industry totally fell in Sri Lanka, and that added to the problem.
Well, I'd like to surprise Dr. Swami by saying I agree with him 100%, 100%. And I quite agree that Mahinda Rajapaksa and Gotabaya Rajapaksa, they stood their ground on the LTT. Dr. Swami knows the European countries, United States, some elements in India. I mean, a particular lady whom neither Dr. Swami, I certainly am not in a hurry to name, they were all completely and violently opposed to the LTT being essentially eliminated. But the Rajapaksas, fortunately, I think a lot of other people in the government had a contrarian view, and that prevailed over the ladies' wishes. But I'd like to say that I fully agree with him. They showed remarkable courage in standing up to the quote-unquote international community. You know, Priya, the international community is defined as the members of NATO. If you're not a member of NATO, ipso facto, you're not a member of the international community as defined by NATO countries. So I must really say that the Rajapaksas stood their ground. And among the reasons why I think I have some access to them is that they know I am, despite all my disagreements with Dr. Swami, I have been a close friend of Dr. Swami for nearly 4 decades. And I think every day of that has been a learning experience to me because he's like that. But I just want to, and I want to agree with whatever he said, and I want to add on to it, because otherwise I don't want to shortchange your very, very important show. And that is, it's now time for the Rajapaksa brothers. I'm not counting Basil in this. Frankly, I have zero respect for Basil Rajapaksa. The chap is still a US citizen, and yet he is completely in the lap of China. Basil Rajapaksa has been in the lap of China for decades. I'm sorry to say. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is a patriotic Sri Lankan. Mahinda is a patriotic Sri Lankan. They're not in the lap of any country, India or China. Basil, and I'm saying this in my capacity as someone who has studied geopolitics and who's got a small team that does a lot of research into these things, he is completely and totally, for the last more than 25 years, in the lap of China. So I'm not going into that. But the reality of the situation is that now it's time for Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Mahinda Rajapaksa to take another tough decision. And that tough decision is to basically position Sri Lanka on the right side of this battle that's taking place for domination over the Indo-Pacific. You have one side, as Dr. Swami very correctly says, both of us are admirers of Chinese culture. We love the Chinese people. We have both had very many pleasant visits to China, and we hope to have more. But that's not the same thing as agreeing with whatever General Secretary Xi is doing. And frankly, I'm at least, and I'm sure he is as well, I know he is, horrified by some of the mistakes that Xi is making. But I'd like to say, in this Cold War 2.0 between the US and China, poor Joe Biden is about 50 years behind the times. He's still about 50 years behind. The poor chap doesn't know it's Cold War 2.0. He doesn't realize the Russian Federation and not the USSR. You can't blame poor Joe Biden. He is what he is. And the American voters chose what he is as their president. So I'm not going to blame him or the American voters, although I'm sure they have changed, a lot of them have changed their minds. But look, Sri Lanka has got to position itself on the right side on the Indo-Pacific situation. It cannot be on the fence or, as Basil wants, be completely on the side of the country that's trying to dominate the Indo-Pacific and prevent the Indo-Pacific from being, in the words of Prime Minister Modi, free, open, and inclusive. That is the choice before Sri Lanka. So long as Sri Lanka does not make that hard and tough choice, the way they made a tough choice about the LTT, resisting pressure, not allowing Mr. Pirabakaran to escape. Well, that choice, if they make on the right side, I agree with Dr. Swami. Why only 10 billion, 15 billion, 20 billion? Not only India, the United States, Japan. Joe Biden is throwing away money on Ukraine, just throwing it away. I don't know why. He could throw money away in Afghanistan, the country that he abandoned to the Taliban. He could throw money in all the different other locations where American troops have created so much havoc. But for some reason, he's throwing it. He seems to have a special affinity to the Ukrainians who are fanatically anti-Russian. Not all the Ukrainians, the anti-Russian Ukrainians. I don't know why Joe Biden has the affinity to Ukrainians. Priya, I'm a humanist. I believe human beings are the same. Wherever we come from, whatever we look like, whatever religion we profess, we are the same. And the reality of the situation is, if Sri Lanka makes the right choice, I agree, India should go all out to help. But if, as Dr. Swami says, the next government is also going to be in the lap of China, sorry, that's money down the drain. Sri Lanka hit a dead end because of its reliance on China. I hope the Rajapaksa brothers understand that. I hope they reverse that. And rather than showing this affinity to China, they are on the right side of the Indo-Pacific. And that is the side of India, the United States, Japan, and Australia.
I'm going to take a quick break and come back, but I think a sort of a gauntlet was thrown, Dr. Swami, on the issue of Ukraine and US, no?
Yeah.
But I saw Dr. Swami fold his hands at that point, which for an anchor, that body language means it's been picked up. Sri Lanka and a little bit of, you mentioned China and the war in the Indo-Pacific, Dr. Swami. Your reaction to what Professor Manalpat said?
Well, first of all, I'd like to address this comment that Rajapaksa should not align with China, and he should be very clear about it. I'm sorry to say it was India who pushed him to China. Hemantota first offered India. Almost 5 projects I know first offered to India. The Manmohan Singh government, Manmohan Singh was not of that frame of mind, but he had no say.
But now what does he do now, given this current
first you must get the facts right. Rajapaksa was pushed into the Chinese thing, and to his credit, he suddenly realized that the Chinese are now drowning him in a slow Chinese torture, which is putting a drip of water upon his head in
Coronate.
solitary confinement. So he's trying to get out. And you can't have these officials go up and down, trotting. And I was shocked when 4 ministers of the Sri Lankan government came to receive this foreign minister of ours. That's not that makes makes them more crazy, and especially if your background is that of a bureaucrat. So therefore, we must go out now towards force without making any conditions. We are come here to help. If afterwards you want to be with us, you want to be with us in the Quad later on. You want us, if you want us, have a joint force against the Chinese. All these we can discuss later. Right now, you have to get out of it. And let me tell you, this crisis that I am witnessing today in Sri Lanka is the same crisis that the Chandrasekhar government and later Narasimha Rao government faced. And we got over it. 1 year of Chandrasekhar and 1st year of Narasimha Rao, we got over it. So there are ways of doing it. But first, you must have the money for that. And that only India can provide. No, Chinese will drive a hard bargain, and then that'll be the end of Sri Lanka as an independent country. And at this particular time, when the Chinese and the Russians are together, going berserk in the world, I think it's a time for us to take a healthy first step and assure the Sri Lankans, deal with the politicians, not with the bureaucrats. Deal directly with Manmohan, not with the Manmohan Singh type, but we got a strong prime minister, although I have disagreements with him, but I know he's a strong prime minister. So therefore, deal with him directly. It is him who has overruled everybody and given this 1 crore. I know how much resistance there was to it, but he overruled it and did it. But now I urge him, give them 10 crores right away and say, whatever you want to take from India, we are not sending anybody. We are not asking anybody to come and inspect anything. And what is there? It's just, first thing he has to do is, solve the essential problems, and that way he can go forward.
And Professor, the role of the US that you had hinted also, should the US reach out or should...
Priya, I want to tell you something of how India took the right call under Prime Minister Chandrasekhar. He was, he gave me the first interview. He gave any newspaper, Times of India. He was a wonderful man, and he had a very good commerce and law minister. I don't want to name him because you're actually, he just talked on the line. And this commerce and law minister told the United States that, all right, you help us in the IMF. He was not the finance minister. I think Chandrasekhar made a mistake in not appointing him to the finance portfolio. That's a different matter. But Chandrasekhar, as prime minister, the prime minister is entitled to his or her own point of view. He told the United States, all right, you refuel in India on your way to, I think it was Iraq or something.
Saudi Arabia.
Kuwait, exactly.
Yeah,
the fighting
Kuwait.
Iraqi forces. You refuel in India and in exchange help us in the IMF. That was a secret deal, let's put it that way. And it was negotiated by someone who, you and I, Priya, may believe is far away from diplomacy, but is actually not. And that is Dr. Subramaniam Swamy. India went on the right side of the situation. India took the side of a fellow democracy, the United States, and it was clearly on the right side. And P.V. Narasimha Rao was much better known to Dr. Swamy than he was to me. He has also been a very close friend of me. He stayed with us at home. Lakshmi, he stayed with me when I was, in a hostel room. Because he had nowhere to stay. He was the General Secretary of the Ramana Maharshi Society. And Ramana Maharshi Society cannot afford anything except free hostel rooms for the General Secretary. But the point is, Narasimha Rao also took a correct call and tried to align with the United States. And you had this very destructive President of the United States. Bill Clinton is the man who put China on steroids. He's the man who put Al-Qaeda on steroids. He's the man who prevented Russia from joining the Western Alliance. And he's the man who refused to admit India as an equal partner. He wanted India as a subsidiary partner, as some kind of a complete, dominated by the United States. This completely disastrous US president was responsible for the fact that Narasimha Rao could not achieve his objective. And people like Arjun Singh and others who were very unhappy with his economic reforms, they all fought back and tried to derail the reforms. But till today, those reforms have in some form or the other continued. And because Rao took the right geopolitical decision. Dr. Swamy took the right decision when he was a minister. He persuaded Chandrasekhar, who became prime minister because of him. It is Dr. Swamy who went to Rajiv Gandhi and said, look, make this gentleman the prime minister. Rajiv Gandhi, I know this personally because Priya, I had a small acquaintance with Rajiv Gandhi. I truly love the man. And he wanted Dr. Swamy to be the prime minister. But Dr. Swamy said, no, it should be Chandrasekhar. So it was Chandrasekhar. But the fact of the situation is, Chandrasekhar took the right call. Later on, of course, Rajiv Gandhi suddenly went into the Russian side and opposed all these refueling. But at that point in time, there was no problem. And IMF loan had come. So the next government was able to tide through. But the reality of the situation is, Narasimha Rao also took the right call. I am simply saying, may I say, I have the deepest of regard and respect for Mahinda Rajapaksa and Gotabaya Rajapaksa. I frankly don't know why they're employing Basil at all in the government, knowing Basil's links with China, and why they send Basil on a mission to India. I mean, you can send him to Beijing and he'll be treated the way servants are treated. I mean, unfortunately, in our feudal societies, because China is a monarchy and with the Red Emperor. But the reality of the situation is they have to take the right geopolitical choice. And if they do, I'm all for ensuring that forget the 5-6 billion or even 10 billion in goods and services from India, 100%, 90 billion in goods and services from the United States, Japan, Australia, European Union, and other countries that want a free and open Indo-Pacific. They got into this dead end. Of course, I mean, I agree with Dr. Swamy. They were pushed into it by the follies of the then UPA government. That government has made several follies. But the reality is, today they have a stark choice. Either they continue into this dead end, which is called reliance on China, or they leap out of it the way Dr. Swamy ensured that India left out of it. The way P.V. Narasimha Rao ensured India left out of it. I hope Gota and Mahinda Rajapaksa, two individuals I admire very much, will take the right call. And if they do, we must help them 100%.
But how secure are the Rajapaksas, Dr. Swamy? They, a lot of their own MPs or party members have left.
Yeah.
And secondly, will the US deal with the Rajapaksas?
No, US has got a grievance against him for other reasons. I have dealt on behalf of Rajapaksa with the United States officials in an informal way. I mean, there was nothing formal. They knew me very well, and I'm considered as anti-communist, right-wing in economics and all that. So Americans are naturally my friends at a personal level. So I called up some of the key officials and said, I'd like to speak to you on this matter. They said, come along. I went to Washington. It is too deep. I think, in fact, they tried to persuade me to ditch him, which I refused to do. So I think that doesn't matter, because the United States, when they see something changing, they are very cost-benefit analysis-minded people. When they see that the Sri Lankans are now coming up and would be a part of an anti-China or a non-China formation with India, they will come around. They're practical people. They're not, there's no emotion in it. But right now they have their knife into him. And I think we should not bank on them. But I do think that India should go all the way. This is an opportunity you should not miss. It's an island nation on the edge of Indian Ocean. I mean, strategically, it's a tremendous thing. We speak the same language. Rajapaksa speaks fluent Tamil, by the way. He held a function for me about a few months ago. Where it was, I think, Navratri. And everything, he spoke in Tamil, everybody spoke in Tamil. So therefore, I think what Monu says, for a change, I agree with him.
This is a rare show where we have two friends agreeing also. But one quick answer from you also, Professor. How secure are the Rajapaksas in Sri Lanka? Not vis-a-vis the US, but within Sri Lanka. Are you seeing a regime change there?
Look, I can say that these two are patriotic Sri Lankans. Both Mahinda and Gotabaya are patriotic Sri Lankans. And that is why I believe that things will be different. Dr. Swami has very, very good relationships with the United States. I don't have a tenth of those relationships, but the reality is the United States is more than Joe Biden. When I used to go to Washington during the Clinton administration, I used to go with people in the administration who were hostile to Clinton's hostility to India, who were friendly with India. I used to go to the media. You had a lot of people who understood that. You get the think tanks, the Republican Party, for heaven's sake, my friendship with the so-called neoconservatives, because neocons like myself, both of us were having no program, nobody would meet us. So neocons, nobody would meet in Washington. India, this Mr. India, nobody would meet me. So we naturally had an affinity to each other. And I must confess, I've been friendly to neocons ever since. Look, the US is more than Joe Biden. And I want to give a personal story.
There's a
chap called Atul Keshav, who was the ambassador to Sri Lanka. And Atul and I are old friends. We go back a long way. Some Marxists in the Biden administration are trying to cut short his career. He's one of the most brilliant foreign service officers I know. He'd be a tremendous asset to America and the Indo-Pacific. But these Marxists want to confine America to Western Europe. And they want to completely corset China. So the point is, I told Atul, what's wrong with you? The Rajapaksa brothers, between them, 50% of the voters of Sri Lanka are with them. You're a democracy and you're not dealing with them. You're ignoring them. For heaven's sake, don't be so, I used a word which I'm not going to use here, but it meant somebody who lacks all intellect and common sense. And Atul, of course, being an old buddy, he smiled at me. He said, hey, can you fix up a meeting with the Rajapaksas? So I said, of course, I know them well. And of course, one reason I know them well, they know I'm friendly with Dr. Swami, whom they admire. So they tolerate me because of my friendship with Dr. Swami. I said, fine. And Atul had the good sense to meet them. So the point is, the Americans can change. And I want to make,
okay, Dr. We're totally out of time now, so I'm going to be a little rude and cut you short. Otherwise, we'll have
sure, no problem.
But thank you both for this very interesting conversation. And I'm probably going to get you both back again. But for now, thank you for this window into Sri Lanka, the US, and of course, India. And a lot about Dr. Swami also. For that, I thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you, Priya.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.